The aerosol hit the chamber at the 4-minute mark, and by the 4-minute 30 mark I expected her on the floor. I am Threl Yeving, Chief Contagion Analyst of the Morkai Plague Directorate, and I had run this exact calibration test on 11 other species before that morning. Cording handlers, Vesrin dockworkers, a pair of Thalati prisoners who went into seizure before the gas had finished settling. 11 for 11, every one of them down inside the first 300 seconds, because that is what Strain 9 Cradle is built to do. The human stood in the center of the proving chamber with her arms loose at her sides, watching the gas thin out around her ankles, and she did not go down. Her name, according to the intake manifest, was Mara Akafer, civilian. A biological engineer pulled off a research outpost during the Vesrin Reach sweep 8 months prior. We had not chosen her for any particular trait. We had chosen her because she was next on the list, and the list existed to feed the proving chamber one specimen at a time until the Cradle Mine's signature strain had a confirmed kill rate across every sapient species we had cataloged. Humans were specimen class 9. Nobody on my floor expected 9 to be interesting. The monitor above the containment glass should have shown a collapse curve, core temperature spiking past tolerance, organs shutting down in sequence, the tidy red line that meant the strain was doing its work. Instead, it showed something my readout had no preset graph for, so the system defaulted to a flat amber trace and waited for me to tell it what it was looking at. I told it to wait. I had engineered Dassel rerun the aerosol concentration. Twice. Both times the canister fired correctly, the particulate count inside the chamber matched spec, and the human kept standing there, hands at her sides, watching us watch her. At 9 minutes her core temperature began to climb. I marked that down as confirmation. Finally, the expected mechanism, fever as the precursor to systemic failure, the same opening stage we'd logged in every other species before the crash. I told Dassel to prepare the post-mortem bay. Then the pathogen count started falling. Not slowing, falling. The live culture sample we'd seeded into her bloodstream alongside the aerosol dose standard protocol, so we could track replication in real time, dropped from a healthy exponential climb to a flat decline in the space of 4 minutes, and kept dropping. Her temperature kept climbing. By the 11-minute mark, her readout sat at a number that would have liquefied a Thalati's brain tissue, and the pathogen count on the same screen had gone to 0. I did not announce this to the room immediately. I checked the sensor calibration first, because the alternative explanation, that a specimen had just burned out a weaponized strain by running a fever hot enough to kill it, was not in any briefing I had ever been given about this species. Run it again, I said. Higher concentration, fresh culture. We doubled the aerosol load and seeded a second, separate culture line directly into her bloodstream this time, bypassing inhalation entirely, so there could be no argument about delivery method. Akafer's temperature was still elevated from the first run. She had not fully cooled, and I remember thinking that worked in our favor, that a body already stressed from one fever spike should fold faster under a second exposure. Every species we tested showed cumulative damage. Stack the load, shorten the clock. Her temperature spiked again within 90 seconds this time, faster than the first run. The pathogen count cratered in under 3 minutes. Dassel said something I will not repeat in a formal record, and I did not correct him for it, because I shared the sentiment. I want to be precise about what the chamber's vitals monitor showed during the second run, because precision is the only thing that matters in a report that is about to be read by people who will not believe it without the numbers attached. Her core temperature reached a level our own physiology charts list as universally fatal across every species we have on file with a comparable thermal tolerance range. Fatal within minutes for a Vesrin, fatal in under 90 seconds for a Thalati. She held that temperature for 6 minutes and 11 seconds. Her vitals showed elevated heart rate, elevated respiration, and this is the detail Dassel kept replaying on the side monitor afterward. No organ degradation signature whatsoever. The fever was not a symptom of system failure. It was the mechanism doing its work cleanly, on schedule, and then standing down once the pathogen count hit 0. I had her temperature checked a third time at the 15-minute mark, after both exposures, expecting some lingering damage the readouts had missed. It had already returned to a normal baseline for her species. She was breathing a little harder than when she'd walked in. That was the whole visible cost. Dassel wanted a third run before I called it. He argued, reasonably, that 2 data points could be coincidence, that we owed the directorate a third confirmation before we put a suspension request on Karn's desk over a single specimen. I let him have it. We seeded a third culture line, this one engineered with a wider thermal tolerance band specifically to survive a fever spike, a strain variant we kept in reserve for exactly this kind of failure, and had never once needed to deploy in 11 prior trials. It bought the pathogen perhaps 90 additional seconds before her temperature simply climbed past its tolerance band as well, the way water rises past a mark someone drew assuming it would stop there. The count went to 0 again. Dassel did not ask for a fourth run. I called the test at that point, not because the protocol required it, but because I had run out of reasons to keep running it. Word went up the chain faster than I sent it. The cradle mind does not attend proving chamber tests directly. It has not occupied a body in longer than any record we hold, and its attention moves through report queues, not observation decks. But within the hour my superior, Director Asif Karn, was standing in my analysis bay with the second run's curve pulled up on his own slate, asking me to walk him through it like I might have made an error he could find by looking harder. I had not made an error. Strain 9 cradle was engineered around a narrow thermal replication window, a band of temperature in which the pathogen's structural proteins stay stable enough to copy themselves before the host's own fever response, however weak, eventually catches up. Every species we had tested either could not raise a fever fast enough to matter, or could not survive raising one high enough to matter. The strain had never needed to survive a host that could do both at once on command, with no apparent damage to itself in the process. Nobody had engineered for that, because nobody on the directorate species list had ever needed it engineered for. Karn asked me directly whether the human had done this voluntarily. I told him the monitor couldn't answer that question, only the human could, and he told me to ask her. I went back into the observation alcove myself. Akafar was seated on the chamber's single bench, a thermal blanket around her shoulders that she had not asked for and did not seem to need, drinking water from a cup one of the junior handlers had passed through the lock without authorization. I did not reprimand him for it. I asked her, through the speaker, whether she had done anything during either exposure, whether there had been a technique, a preparation, anything she had controlled. She looked up at the glass for a moment before she answered, and there was no defiance in it, no performance for the room. Just the flat, slightly tired tone of someone repeating something she'd said before to someone else, somewhere worse than this. Already tried that, she said, with worse fevers than this. That was the entire answer. She did not elaborate, and I did not ask her to, because Karn was already drafting the recall order on the strain before I'd finished transcribing the line for the file. The directorate suspended strain 9 cradle's deployment schedule that same cycle, pending a full thermal tolerance redesign that, as of this report, remains in its third unsuccessful iteration. Specimen Akafar was reclassified out of the proving rotation under a holding order I did not write and was not consulted on. The Cradle Mines Q has not sent a follow-up directive on her status, which in my experience means it is still deciding what one specimen surviving 2 engineered exposures is worth to a campaign built on the assumption that nothing does. My final entry in the case file reads as follows: pathogen confirmed inert across both exposure vectors. Host vitals confirmed stable. Cause of failure confirmed as host physiology, not procedural error. Recommend immediate reclassification of species 9 from proving subject to unknown variable. I filed it under that heading because I could not, in good professional conscience, file it under anything else. The room had wanted proof the plague worked. We got an answer instead, and it closed the file before any of us were ready for it to.